Unity has one big problem, and it's too bad to make money with it. Not from a developer perspective, but from Unity's perspective itself. So normally most of the developers use a personal edition. Only small studios use Plus or even Pro. And you have to be Pro if you make more than 200k in revenue. So Unity really wants AAA studios or bigger studios to use Unity. And there are two main aspects. So one is the game itself and the other one is the engine. AAA studios or bigger studios want to make fast and beautiful multiplayer games. And Unity games are written in C# and C# has a problem. So if you use vanilla C# or C# as intended, it can be really slow. So if you go just right away, there are some flaws instead of using C++. Take this class for example. It's a very simple class. It's a person class. It has an integer, a string and another string for the age, gender and name. But if you have a look at the memory, for example, the person is a pointer, the age is a pointer, the gender, and it's more like a reference, not a pointer. So there are some more informations to it. So here are the information attached to the pointer, and the pointer is pointing to the actual value, and the person pointer is pointing to all the properties, and if you have multiple persons there is an array or even a list that is pointing to pointers of pointers and so on. And the whole thing is just messing up in the memory, and you don't have to care because C# does it for you. But what if I say to you that this definition of a person is way faster, but it's not really object-orientated definition. So for example, you have a persons class which do not contain one person but all the persons in your application, and you just say, okay, I want to instantiate 100 or 200 persons, and you just store the lengths. So if I get rid of the properties, you just can say, okay, create 1,000,000 persons, and the length will be set to 1,000,000, and you have 1,000,000 persons. Every person has an index, and you do not have to save the index, so it's very memory efficient. And then you have to add properties, because now it's interesting. So, and you just initiate an array for all these properties, and the index is now on the property and not on the object itself. So you have only one object with several arrays. So let's have a look at this simple code snippet. So I just created an array of persons. You see, it's just a person array, and I will try to find the maximum. So I initiate the maximum with 0, and then I take the maximum of the current maximum and the people objects ih, because I iterate over all the peoples in the people objects array. I do the same with this entity approach, the second approach I showed to you, and then I just use length as well, but now length is not the property of the array, it's just the property that I declared. And here I only have one object instance of people entities, and I say age and use the index here. So the only difference is that you use the index here directly on the array and then access the property against, have one object and the property and the index is at the end. Okay, let's start this. So here's the stopwatch for start and stop, and I will do this 10 times for every approach to really have a good comparison between those two and to eliminate side effects. And here we go. 0.23 seconds for objects and 0.20 seconds for entities, and it's very stable, so the result is always the same. You see, you have around 10% speed increase, and just on this simple operation maximum. So the increase of speed will just be bigger if you use this more often and in more complex situations. But the really gain is here. Generated objects, generated object array takes around 10 seconds, and generate the entities is 1 second. And this is why Unity is introducing the entity component system, because it just works that well. And this is how Unity explains this to us in the GDC. First it's a mess, now it's aligned in arrays, and this is how the memory somehow looks like. So instantiation, we had a 10-time boost in our small application, and here you see it's not only possible to instantiate some bullets, it's possible to really have millions of bullets because they are so much easier to spawn. The memory consumption is that much better. So there's no problem here, everything is working smooth. But that means you have to rewrite huge part of the engines, and I'm excited to see when this will happen, when they will get rid of the mono behavior, and how it will integrate with the game UI or the game editor UI, because it should be this simple as it is right now, and I think it's harder than with the approach with mono behavior. The other things are multiplayer games, and here you have the options to let them on local as a single player game. You can do it in a LAN, but that's not multiplayer or internet multiplayer. So what you can do is direct peer-to-peer or client-server relay with UNet. But I already have a comparison between Photon and UNet on my channel, and UNet is really not that good. UNet is not that stable. You have no master client migration, you have no punch through. So, and peer-to-peer is not always the best option. And if you are a bigger company, you can really afford a server, and you should do it because then you have more control. And then there's the last option. And Unity teamed up with Google Cloud to really bring those services to the customer, but as the entity component system, this system is also still in preview and you can't really use it right now, so we have to wait. The other thing is, if you want to rank multiplayer games, you want to add physics, and physics is a really hard problem to solve in the network. What you want to do is you want to calculate the physics on the server and validate the calculated physics on the client. And therefore the client has to do the same calculation as the server, and independent of the operating system, the hardware you are using, or anything else. So there is Unity physics. It's a little bit updated for the data-oriented tech stack, and the features are quite nice. But if you have a look at the Havoc physics, which will be integrated into the Unity engine, you see it's a C++ plugin, and the feature is it has more stable solving, and I guess it's more deterministic, and you need this deterministic behavior to really have physics synced over the network for a multiplayer experience. So fast and beautiful multiplayer games, they are working on it, but they are still not there. It will take them, I think, about a year until they have all the services out and ready. And the other component you should have a look at is engine. You want to have a rich toolset and full control over the engine. This is absolutely necessary if you are working in a big team. You have different roles, and every role in your project needs a different toolset, and the toolset has to be there. And in their roadmap, they showed which roles they will have, or they will really support in such a project. These are programmers, animators, artists, and designers, and they will have updates in everything so that these roles really can do their work efficiently. And here you see what they will do in the future to enrich the toolset, for example, post-processing, cinemachine, scriptable render pipeline, and so on. And you already see there is a 2020 in the timeline, so it will take time until every preview package goes out of preview and can be used in a productive or production ready game. They're really rewriting and refactoring everything. The whole animation system, for example with Cinemachine or Cinematica and Cinemachine. The render pipelines, these are needed to have, for example, the shader graph, which is there in other engines like Unreal Engine for years now. And this was really necessary to really enhance the graphics in Unity and keep up with the industry. And we are talking about the Unreal Engine, and if you ever started it, you will see that they have something like blueprints. It's a visual scripting language where you just plug in anything and it just works and you do not have to code anymore, at least for the most part of your game. And they will introduce visual scripting. So here you have the exact equivalent to blueprints. I as a programmer do not appreciate it because I think it's faster to just write my code, because a programming graph can look as messy as bad code if you want. But they have to do it to just enable artists and designers to implement some logic to the game, even though they are not able to write code or they do not want to write code. The last thing is full control. You have some kind of control over the pipeline now, because it's a scriptable rendering pipeline, but you do not have the full control over the engine. You can reassemble the engine, but the engine is not open source in a way that you can. It is open source, you can look at it, but you are not allowed to modify it, recompile it as you wish. If you are a big studio and you want to change the engine, you do not have the right to change the engine and then publish your game. So in my opinion, Unity will completely change, and if you do not use Unity for a while and you will come back in 1 or 2 years, it will maybe look the same, but the behavior will be completely different. Subscribe to my channel to get more straight to the point tutorials.